Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another week here at Just Gay Stuff Podcast. I am Jess.
And I'm Lauren, and I'm a bit silly today.
Lauren is silly because she's on the good stuff.
I am on the good stuff. I had surgery a few weeks ago.
You had surgery on Friday.
Oh, yeah, on Friday.
See,
she
already doesn't know. Lauren had surgery on Friday, so she's still a bit dopey. So she said at the beginning of this episode, I don't know how my head's going to be in this episode, but hopefully it's good. So
usually I haven't had any complaints.
If Lauren's funnier than normal, you
then
guys
something's
know why.
wrong. No, I'm kidding.
Well, if you're joining us for the very first time ever, hello and welcome. I have noticed that some of our very first episodes have been ticking over a few more numbers.
Really?
Yeah, so I feel like people are joining us maybe midway and now they're going back to the beginning of the catalogue.
I love that so much.
I love it too. So
that's super exciting.
Whatever made you jump over to our channel or tune in on Joy FM, thank you so much. And
Yes,
if you
thank
like
you.
what you hear and you haven't gone back to the beginning of the catalogue,
Do it.
please do. Have a listen to the early episodes. I know a lot of podcasts out there say things like, oh, don't listen to our first episodes.
Oh no, that's where our beginning and our story is. I'm like, actually do it, then you'll see what our craziness is about.
Yeah, if you want to know the deep dive on Lauren and I and that
and our relationship and
'cause
how we got here.
We are partners.
We
and
are.
maybe people that have tuned in later along the line don't know that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
They'll get to know that very quickly by the way we act.
Yes. But there's more than 60 episodes in the catalogue.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I think we've said this a few times, but when we started, I didn't know if we
I
would...
did not think we would be here.
Well, I didn't think we'd get past 10 episodes, really.
No, and I've said to you quite a few times actually that I'm very grateful for the opportunities and the people that we've spoken to
definitely.
thus far.
Yeah. And, you know, a lot of people have said, what is there to talk about in the
so much stuff.
LGBTQIA plus community?
How do you keep going? I think is the number one question we get.
Well, there's heaps to talk about.
So much.
There's so much. But if you're going to go back through the catalogue, there's definitely things that will keep you entertained there. There are some heavy things. There's some light things. There's something for every mood that you're in. So,
and I think it just constantly keeps going with society and the way that things go. Topics come up that need to be spoken about.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So if you've looked at the title of this week's episode, you'll know that we are diving into our experiences of
Ooh,
straight
this
relationships
is very raw.
versus queer relationships.
Dun, dun, dun.
Do we need a trigger warning? Do you think you'll say
Yeah, we may.
for what?
I'll tell you when
Vices?
I get there. Yeah, I think trigger warning for vices.
Like alcoholism and gambling?
Yeah, just that a few of my stories touch on mental health issues.
Just give a little trigger before you're going to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So how many times have you heard a straight girlfriend say, maybe I'll just date girls because it would be so much easier? Well, Lauren and I are going to peel back the onion layers on, well, is it actually easier?
How many times have you rolled your eyes at that sentence?
Oh, so many times. But we're going to go through our experiences to showcase the positive and negative emotions because personally, I'm not sure that one is better than the other. I think it all depends where you land sexually and how you connect with your significant other.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think we've both experienced straight and queer relationships. So I think we're just going to pick apart a bit from both and see what happened.
Yeah. And look, there's a few layers to each relationship and experience. So I think the first layer of the onion, we're going to start with meeting people.
Oh.
So let's go from the very first step of putting yourself out there. What was it like for you meeting someone who would have been a straight partner versus a queer partner?
Oh, okay. You and I have only been together almost 2 years in May, but it feels like we've been together for a lifetime.
Oh, we'll touch on that.
Oh, okay.
in a while.
Okay, we'll get there.
So let's just peel back to the meeting of people. Do you think it is easier to meet someone who is for a straight relationship or a queer relationship based on your experience?
Oh, okay. That's a really interesting question and tough question. I think if you're going just on the basis of meeting someone, for me as a very femme presenting queer person, even though I always identified as under the queer umbrella of bisexual, but I didn't identify.
Yeah, you stayed on the train and got to the next station.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good analogy.
You're the bye now, gay later.
Yeah, I was. I did do that, even though everything else in hindsight is like she was gay always. But anyways, I think because, I was female presenting, it was a lot easier for me to meet a straight person and enter a straight well, I can't even say enter a straight relationship. For me, I was a very quiet, awkward, nerdy kind of person. I wasn't a very out there, go get it kind of person, which you would have no clue now considering I host a podcast with you.
Yeah, but I think we've talked about this in the sense of you can be an
extroverted introvert.
That's it.
Yeah. I knew what you're trying to say there.
And I think that depends on the people that you're with.
Yeah, it definitely does. I never actually had an official boyfriend until I was 19.
Mm-hmm.
And that was only really when I moved up here, and I lived the whole rest of my life in Melbourne.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I had like flings and stuff, and I thought that I had relationships or what were supposed to be relationships with people or men at the time. But I think a lot of that was also me being so, I say quote unquote innocent, but the people who really know me
they know that you
me.
are no such thing.
The curiosity in me just wanted to know things when I came from such that goody two shoes upbringing, I guess.
But how did you meet your straight partner?
How did I meet my straight
your
partner?
Queer partner?
Okay.
And what was the differences in those meetings?
Right, okay.
Endone brain.
Endone brain. We did warn everyone I was going on tangents here, but that's okay.
No, it's all relevant though. It's all relevant information to the story. Because
yeah, honestly, because I had just moved up here, essentially, I had no friends, no nothing, and my first intention wasn't even just to find a partner, straight or not at the time. I had just moved up here. My sisters were still in school. My best friend was still living in Melbourne. And I remember laying in bed one day feeling so depressed, and Mum goes, why don't you just go on one of those dating sites? And this was before Tinder and Bumble were really a big like blow up in your face thing. So
what did you go on? RSVP?
Nah.
Ashley Madison?
No,
that's for married people.
Nah, it was the Plenty of Fish catfish.
Oh, POF.
The catfish hub. It literally has a fish in the name. Plenty of fish. But no, Mum was like, why don't you do this? And I was like, I don't want to go on a dating website. She goes, not to date anyone, just to make friends. And I was like, okay. So I went on there and I made a few friends. I actually ended up meeting up with this girl, but it didn't really like do anything. We just became friends.
Just for friends, perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. And
like
then
the pretense was just for friendship.
Yeah. And then I ended up meeting this guy on there and we got along for a bit. And then I don't know how we ended up in a relationship, but we did. And we were in a relationship for 8 years.
It's a long time.
It's a long time. And
it's a long time to not know how you ended up with that person.
It's been so long now, and a lot of it's been blocked out of my memory. But I think that was a lot easier to connect with a man than a woman. In meeting my first queer partner, because you were my only second queer partner.
You can't have more than 1 second.
Huh?
You said you were my only second.
You're my only always.
I am your second.
Yes, that's what I meant to say.
Because you are my queen.
No, I met her on Tinder, I think. And that was really hard for me because I had met someone previously also on Tinder, and I've spoken about that person on the podcast before, being sort of a lesbian shark kind of stuff. So for me, it was very like new and confronting waters, not really knowing where I fit, because I was like, am I bisexual? Haven't I found the right man? Haven't I this? But also to try and meet up with women who are able to, I guess, empathize with you that you're newly out in that queer space without taking advantage of you and actually being there. And especially for Tinder, it was a lot of like hookup or a lot of
they want a third for their straight relationship
or a unicorn. And I was like, oh, I'm not about that. I'm already having such like inner turmoil in my own head and stuff anyways.
And for anyone who doesn't know what the term lesbian shark is, that we patented in like our very first episode,
1,
it's where
predatory.
Exactly what Lauren said. It's especially a lesbian who has been out for a lot longer than you, wanting to give you your first lesbian experience and then essentially just ghost you.
Yeah.
Which isn't ideal.
No, it wasn't. And it made me question things a bit. So again, I was also very hesitant when meeting my first queer partner because I had just come off the back of that lesbian shark experience.
Yeah.
That I was like, So to answer your question in this long-winded
I've loved it. It's been a journey.
It definitely was a lot harder to meet up with someone via a queer space or a queer avenue than a straight one. What about you?
Well, firstly, I want to start off by saying that all of my relationships with men were quite brief and not really in my adult years.
Yeah. Like high school.
High school and then early 20s.
Yeah.
So they were formative years, but definitely not adult in the sense of
because now
you've
old.
got your shit together. Well, yeah. But meeting people, I have to say that meeting straight partners, I feel, came a lot more naturally than meeting a potential queer partner.
Yeah.
Because being young, you meet people through friends and you hang out and you slowly start to get to know each other and then feelings develop. And I feel like that only ever really happened once when I had a crush on a girl from uni, but I never went in with the intention of like linking up to find like her as a queer partner. But yeah, finding a queer partner for me has either been in the same respect of like friends of friends or the dating apps.
Yeah.
And I feel like once you become comfortable with your sexuality, sometimes like you start to play cat and mouse with new people that you meet, just trying to figure out their sexuality and where you stand with them. And like I've said in a previous episode, I feel like it can be tough for you to express your feelings to someone as a queer person than in a straighter scenario, because in that straight scenario, if one person has feelings and the other person doesn't, it's awkward. But in the queer scenario, if you have feelings and the other person doesn't, you risk that humiliation of, am I now going to open myself up to homophobia because like I don't even know if that person now accepts me because they know this thing about me because they know I like them. So I feel like even with friendships in that way, I've talked about recently, I just started playing soccer every week. And soccer is a gay as fuck sport, everyone. Like
you think so?
for women, we all know that LGBTQIA plus players in sport, especially in women's sports, there is like a higher average of queer people than straight people, I think, mostly.
Yeah. But I was like, you might have to check those facts.
Yeah, maybe I do. So don't quote me, but you know, just on the surface level of what we see, and I'm talking soccer here. I feel like
I'm also thinking like it's the same with all girls' schools as well. If there's a group of girls, 1 out of 5 is going to be gay.
Well, 1 in every 4 people is gay, apparently.
So, and there's 2 of them sitting right here.
But so in terms of my soccer team, right, I show up to this gay as fuck sport and all the women in my team are straight.
Except for your best friend.
Except for me and my best friend.
You guys are the token gays of the team.
And you know, suddenly I felt this sense or need that maybe I need to hold my personality back a little because you just don't know how well you will be received. It's that thing like we talk about, like every time you meet a new person, you don't know. And then that's even greater when someone mentions that they went to church on the weekend.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sitting here sweating.
I forgot about that.
I'm sitting here sweating like, fuck, maybe I won't be accepted by these people. But I do know that that's an irrational fear to have nowadays because religion doesn't always hold those negative connotations. But
no, they don't.
It's hard to retrain your brain.
They don't, but I think that's what's been instilled into us, especially by the church, people being like, that's not okay.
But I feel like in certain aspects that is changing.
Yeah, it is changing.
Because
and I know
now we have these great things like LGBTQ churches.
Yeah, I love that. We need to go to one just for fun.
No. I feel like there's still that religious aspect. And so I'm like, I'm an atheist for sure.
Fair. I mean,
you're spiritual as fuck.
Yeah, I'm very spiritual. Mine's not even about the church or religion side
just
of
want to
things.
meet
It's
people.
just it's just the connection side.
So to answer the first line of questioning, I feel like it was definitely more natural to try and find a straight relationship versus a queer relationship.
I think
for me.
I think it is too, and I don't know if it's the same for our male counterparts that are in that queer space. But I think especially as women, it is a lot easier to find those straight relationships or male attention. Yeah.
Especially when you are femme presenting.
Yeah.
Because our counterparts that are masc presenting, men kind of see that and they know that, okay, this person probably is looking for female attention rather than male attention. And us femme presenting or STEM presenting in certain aspects don't get that same quality, I guess.
No.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where, you know, I'm all for people being who they are and being loud and proud, but I am also like, maybe that's where the likes of Fletcher, I guess, and you have to be out there and that charismatic and that stuff for people to really understand the queerness of it all.
Yeah. You're mentioning Fletcher is really important because for us as queer women, the stereotype for representation was always the butch lesbian.
Yeah, no.
We never had those STEM lesbians in the forefront of media, or we never had really femme presenting lesbians in the forefront of media. So when you start to see those people reflect how you look, you start to think, oh my God, I am valid.
Yeah.
And oh my God, I can see myself in this program or this people or this real world.
Literally.
Okay, let's move on. So what about getting to know someone and having an emotional connection? Do you feel like an emotional connection was harder to create in your straight relationship or harder in a queer relationship?
That's such a hard question for me to answer. I think I've only ever been in 3 real relationships, and this is my current and last one.
You hope?
I know. Trust me, I know. Well, with the first one, you know, being that heterosexual relationship for 8 years, I think I was so desperate to feel some sort of love and attention because, you know, I was the girl that got bullied at school for having red hair and freckles. I was the girl that always lost out to her sisters being the prettier ones, so didn't get the boys. So I think I clung on to anyone who suddenly had an attraction or gave me the tiniest bit of attention, which is wrong, but I had no self-worth and no
But when you're
nothing at the
craving
time.
affection and you're craving that emotion, then of course you're going to gravitate to somebody who's giving you that validation.
Yeah. When I had met that person, it felt easy to get along with this person for at least the first year or so. And, you know, this person was there for me through a lot of ups and downs and health issues and stuff. And, you know, there was a lot of very confronting stuff that he didn't walk away from, which was surprising.
And that's what you want in someone. So then that masquerades itself as pure love.
Yeah. So that was the hardest part. But just a quick trigger warning, I'm about to mention vices to do with gambling and alcohol and a bit of mental health issues and stuff like that. So if you are not okay with listening to that, just skip 15 seconds later. Yeah, the emotional connection was there in the beginning, and then a part of me has done a lot of work on myself since then. And I think in the beginning, a little part of him also love bombed me quite a bit. He would take me to the shops, or he would look after me or do something, and it's such stuff that now I'm like, that was simplistic things that should have been done.
I was like, wow, is that all it takes? I'll just take you to the shops.
Should have been done anyways. But at the time I didn't know any better. Like, that was my first real relationship. And then this person unfortunately suffered from severe paranoid schizophrenia that was drug induced. So then it was a lot of use his money to buy drugs or to gamble or smoke. Then it was use mine. And then he would guilt trip me into thinking that I had to do those things.
If you loved him.
Yeah, if I loved him, or he would hurt himself, or
So it was like coercive control.
Yeah, so it was really bad, and I had no understanding of what coercive control was.
But people also, when you're growing up, don't teach you what those red flags look like. And so then when we're so desperate for connection, you're going to accept that.
Yeah, and I think for me, being such a soft and open soul, craving that love, I was like, oh, that's just his mental illness. He can't help that. And I mean, I dealt with it for 8 years.
Yeah. So how do you feel that connection that you had with him was versus the connection you had with your queer partner?
Yeah, so I just had to tell that kind of backstory to
You needed
that.
the backstory so that the front story made sense.
It made sense. Yeah, well, because I thought that's what an emotional connection was. I didn't realize that that was red flags or control or abuse that was going on, emotional abuse, until my sister was like, hey, something's actually going on here. And, you know, in terms of like the emotional connection and as well as a sexual connection, I found it really, really hard to be intimate with this person. And for the life of me, I couldn't work out why.
Yeah.
I knew that I always had the bisexual feelings, but I couldn't work out why.
Like intimacy was a struggle.
Yeah, intimacy was such a struggle. But then the only time I ever was like thinking about intimate stuff was to do with girls.
Yeah. So your brain was like, hello, Lauren, wake up.
Wake up.
You're a lesbian.
Yeah, literally. I had people tell me that from a young age. So to answer the queer side of things, before you, I've only ever had one queer relationship. And it took a little bit longer for me to open up emotionally to her. I say a little bit longer, but like it was quick in lesbian terminology.
But then like longer because of the Tinder.
Yeah, it was
stuff.
longer because of the Tinder stuff, and longer because of the past relationship that I had, and because I was still trying to navigate my way through this world. But once I did, and once I had my first,
Rainbows
to rainbows
and butterflies and
to
all the magic.
and to being aware and being like, oh, dickhead. That makes sense. That's why you only ever thought about women. Or that's why you only ever cared about the women on the screen, not the men.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, duh. I didn't have that same sort of, I guess, emotional connection to when I did sleeping with my first queer partner for the first time. And I think that's because we had built up a little bit of an emotional connection first, and we had spoken about different things. And I think, I don't know if it's just such a cliche thing to say, and you know what I'm going to say anyways, that women connect easier with women because
It's true though.
They know what they understand, and that's not anything against men. I think it's just on an emotional level, I was able to communicate better with her and connect better with her.
But also taking the sexual aspect out of it.
Yeah.
You as a woman can connect with another woman on a different level than with a man because you know what she goes through in her life. And you can, in general, yes, we're all different, but in general, you know a thought process of a woman versus the thought processes of a man, you know? So I think on that level, the queer relationship is always going to win.
Yeah.
Because it's just natural that we connect with people who are the same as us.
Yeah, so in to answer that question again, these are a bit of like rounded stories getting there. Yeah, the queer relationship was definitely a lot easier to connect emotionally once it was there. But like you said, I think women connect better emotionally to one another. What about you?
Looking back on my straight relationships, I think I've come to realize quickly, especially now, that I never took any of them seriously.
Really?
I feel like...
It's so weird when you have those hindsight moments. You're like,
I know.
Oh, shit, I was a bitch.
I feel like I always knew there was going to be an end to them, and it was never like if it would end, it was always going to be when.
Yeah.
And I definitely know now that emotionally I never felt connected to a straight partner. Bearing in mind, again, that I haven't had a serious straight relationship since like 22.
Yeah.
But probably even in my most serious straight relationship, which was my last one, I felt the most connected, but I still felt so guarded.
Yeah.
In so many ways. I think I always felt like no one was ever going to get me. And I felt like no one was going to ever understand me. And you know, you have those thoughts like, oh, is this what love feels like? And you think, oh, is that it?
I know exactly what you mean because that's how I felt too. And I was like, oh,
is this we settle for?
Yeah.
And I think the biggest difference in my straight relationships was I always wanted my own space. Even if I really liked the guy, like I never wanted to spend that much time with him.
Yeah.
And then when I met my first girlfriend, all that changed. I was obsessed. I was like typical lesbian fashion.
You hold.
All of the lesbian jokes. I just wanted to like live inside her. And I don't mean like
Creepy.
in a sexual way, but you know,
Skin
all of the
suit.
lesbians listening right now. Yeah, exactly. All of the lesbians listening right now will know exactly what I mean. Like you just want to be inside her skin. Like you just don't want to be away from that person.
Yeah.
It sounds so creepy. Like
It does, but it's true.
And so like I remember specifically there was this prospect that I was going to be away for 6 weeks when I had my very first girlfriend. And I remember...
Were you so scared?
I remember feeling like that was the end of the world.
Yeah.
6 weeks away from this person, I was not going to ever be able to do it. Like I just felt like that was my world ending. For me as a person who had never had that fairy tale thing as a kid, like, oh, I'm going to grow up and get married. Like I could never see those things for myself.
I think because we also come from similar upbringings, like we said this morning. So the fairy tales weren't really shown in our upbringings either.
But like you see them in movies and you think, oh, this is what little girls are supposed to want. And I feel like I never really wanted that. Or I thought about it, but I could never picture me with like a guy at an altar, you know?
Yeah.
And then when I got my first girlfriend, suddenly I could like picture my whole world and my whole life with this person. And it's like that light bulb that we talk about where all these feelings just flood you and you feel like...
It's an overwhelming. You're like, oh my God.
Yeah, you feel like no one you've ever met compares to this one person in this moment. And obviously I never experienced that in a straight relationship. And for me, that emotional connection is so strong in queer relationships. And I think that just comes down to like how we work together and understand each other.
I think it's a communication thing, what it really comes down to.
Yeah, I think it's just that mutual understanding of like women understanding other women more and things like that. Yeah. So that's where I'm at with that one.
Wow.
I think queer relationships are definitely easier for connection.
Yeah, I think that too.
Next one.
Ooh, okay. I'm ready. Hit me.
Straight breakup versus queer breakup.
Oh, okay. I'm going to need the tissues for this.
I feel like this is a big one because queer breakups are so dramatic.
They are.
But I feel like there are reasons for that, and I want to get into that. But you had some similar experiences between your straight relationship breaking down and your queer relationship breaking down. So when we pull that apart, given the circumstances, do you feel like they both affected you in the same way, or do you feel like one affected you more than the other?
One definitely affected me a lot more than the other one. Hold on, let me get comf. I got to get into position for this story.
Storytelling mode.
I do.
Do you know, I didn't expect this episode to be this deep.
They're deep, provoking questions. I feel like everyone who's been in both sides of the coin, coin, so to speak, would have their own stories or versions.
That's what I feel. It's
maybe
very
we
relatable.
Should do a I'm just going off topic here, but maybe
Alive.
Yeah, alive. No, I was going to say maybe we should do, you know how we've done the worst first dates? Maybe we should get people to write in their
straight
versus queer breakups.
Yeah.
Anyways, getting back to the question at hand, I definitely think my queer relationship breakup hurt me a lot more, but I've got to go back. So for the straight relationship ending, I think that didn't hurt me as much because I was the one
to end it.
I think a part of me also, by the 7th, 8th year, I was exhausted.
You were ready to take yourself out of the
toxicity
behavior.
And like you've seen the photos of how the toxicity affected me and everything. I look like a completely different person.
You really do.
And I had no idea, honestly, honest to God, hand on my heart, I had no idea that's what I looked like.
Like it was affecting you physically.
Yeah. In my mind, I still thought I was this size 10, 12 skinny person that just had medical issues. I didn't realize I was putting so much weight and had lost my hair and had this. I was stressed. I was trying to work out how to live week to week on a disability pension with like $0 in my bank.
With a toxic person
manipulating me and saying that he would do all these things if I left. And I think because I was so physically exhausted, a part of me knew for a while that we had to break up, but I had never been in a situation before where I was the one to do the breaking up. Like this was my first ever relationship. And I also, you know, was still in that mindset of the low self-esteem and who else is going to ever love me and
I've been there.
all this stuff. I'm like, maybe I should just hold on. You know, you go through that.
Maybe this is love this is what we accept from people.
This is what I deserve. This is what I can fix. And I think I just got to a point where my sister and best friend really slapped some sense into me, not physically slapped, but mentally slapped and just said, you know, you've got to work out a way whether you move out with this person and that's you spending life. And then I feel like I would have been very isolated from my family that way, or
make a change.
Yeah, essentially. So he got home after God knows where, being at the pokies or something. I was crying, he was crying, trying to do the manipulating thing. I couldn't drive yet either, so he was the one driving the car, and I just had to pull off that Band-Aid and say, this is it. Like, I love you, I care for you deeply, but I can't do this anymore. And that was that, really. And that was hard for me in itself because I'm not that person who's able to deal with that stuff and do things head on. But I think I had such a support network and such a strength built up because I had it in my head for ages that something had to be different. It just couldn't keep going on like that. So I think on that regard, the straight one was a lot easier for me because my queer relationship was my first queer relationship, and I know that I've touched on it in a few episodes previously, especially in our first ever beginnings episode. We spoke about how we got together essentially through mutual breakup issues.
And then mutual friends.
Yeah. I think the queer relationship breakup would have still been hard and harder than the straight one. But I think this particular breakup was really, really hard, and it literally broke me, like shattered me into pieces because I was blindsided essentially. And I think...
You had those rose-coloured glasses on.
I did, and you've heard the story, and I'm sure I've touched on it a bit on this podcast as well, where her and I were engaged. We had proposed to each other after 2.5 years, like every typical lesbian does. And she was planning a wedding and talking about our kids. To then, you know, suddenly this girl had started at her work. And I was introduced to this girl as her fiance, and we had met, and it was fine, and we all got along. And then I also have to put another trigger warning here, and I should have known when getting into this relationship with this person about their vice and the fact that I had already been
There was some red flags waving.
red flags. So,
and you're like, I'm a bull, baby.
already had been through that. Was, you know, she was an alcoholic or is an alcoholic. I can't speak. I don't know what she's doing now. But at the time of meeting, she was sober for 2 years, and she was sober for the 2.5 years that we were together, essentially.
Until the end.
Until the end, yeah. And then when she met this girl who was really like a young party girl, I should have, like, there's so many things that I should have known. So even though I say blindsided, I should have known in a way because, you know, they all got drunk for Christmas parties. She didn't come back to our bed. She stayed in the lounge with this chick. She pulled this chick on her lap while she was holding my hand at the bar, and I'm like, what the fuck?
But at the time, do you feel like we make excuses for people that we love?
Yeah, we do. And I didn't think anything of it because we were all drinking and having a good time. So we were all like holding on to each other and being touchy.
You're sitting here saying like, I should have known. But hindsight's 2020. You look at it through the lens now and you go, yeah, I should have known. But in that space, cut yourself a break in that.
Yeah.
You know, we are so blindsided by the people that we love. It's so true.
Literally. And then it was my nan's birthday, and I had just come back from Melbourne or wherever. It was like my nan's birthday, and she had bought me tickets to go. And I was like, oh, that's a really nice thing. Had I love yous. And then I was ghosted. And then it was came home. I love you, but I'm not in love with you. Breakup. Well, it wasn't really essentially breakup. I was like, well, what are we doing? She's like, I don't know. Walked out the door, lied and said she was going to someone else's house, but she was going to that girl's house. And then she said a day or two later that she was with that girl. And I was like, yeah, no shit. I'm not an idiot. And then she just said, I'm not having a conversation with you. It's over. I don't know what to tell you. I'm not picking up the phone. And I remember that really, really shattering me. And I think because it was my first queer relationship ever, and I think the first one always gets you. I think that also comes back to that emotional thing that you said, connecting on that level, on that emotion with someone and creating that bond. And I think my blind side came from the fact that she was still saying the I love yous, and she was still planning a wedding, and she was still being like, oh, we'll do this. It's
that like actions are this, and then she's saying all of this. So it's like her actions spoke louder than her words, but all you could hear were the words at the time.
Literally. That definitely was the kicker for me. And I was just very, like, I couldn't do anything. I was very severely depressed, very grateful for the support and like my best friends that I had around me the whole time that really looked after me. What about you?
Well, going on that deep dive of why queer breakups can hurt more or be a lot more dramatic, and especially when it's your first. It's talking about those feelings before, how your whole world opens up when you finally realize you're queer, or when you finally meet this person that opens your world up. When that ends, it can be the darkest place.
Literally.
Especially with how fast queer relationships move, or especially lesbian relationships, how fast they can progress. The world can feel like it ends essentially as soon as it begins. And I feel like that happened to me with my first crush. Unfortunately, she was never my first girlfriend, although I say unfortunately. But looking back now that I'm older, it's probably fortunately.
Very fortunately.
Because literally we have nothing in common.
She could have been your first breakup anyway.
Yeah,
so.
It felt like that. And look, I know it never would have worked out. We had nothing in common. We are so different as people. And I think it was really hard coming to terms with the fact that I really liked this girl. She led me on for a very long time.
Is this at uni?
Yeah. So she led me on for like 2 years, only to tell me that she could never, ever seriously think about me in that way after briefly being intimate with me. Not like the whole way, but still you're experiencing intimacy with somebody. And like that fucking sucked. Like my whole world crashed over that for sure.
Yeah.
And looking back, I think it's definitely because some people open you up and make you feel love and affection in ways that you never thought were possible. And then they sell you that Hallmark fairy tale that you see in the movies,
Yeah.
you think, oh my God, this is what love is meant to feel like. I can feel it now. This person is showing it to me, and then they leave. So I think in that respect, if you've discovered your sexuality over a period of time and then finally felt the freedom to be yourself or the freedom to love who you want to love, and that person's opened up your world, only for that to be so fleeting or leave you in ways that you didn't imagine,
Yeah.
I do think it's harder than a straight relationship.
I think that's what made me really break after the first queer breakup and first queer relationship, was the fact that I came out later in life and I was experiencing all this stuff later in life.
For the first time.
For the first time. So it was such a vulnerable place for me to be. And then I suddenly went, oh, is this it? First the lesbian shock experience and then now this. And I'm like, what if I never meet anyone else? I'm very grateful that I did.
Yay!
But still, and like our connection was over trauma anyway.
Yeah. Okay, the final question while picking apart this topic is quite the stereotypical question for the lesbians in the room.
Yeah.
But let's talk about being friends with your ex.
Ugh.
Is it normalized among straight people? And why are we trying to normalize it in the queer community, especially in lesbian circles?
I don't really hang around many straight people anymore,
Well, I think it's pretty...
to be fair, but I don't know if
The stereotype is that
lesbians
straight
are friends with
people-
their ex and straights aren't.
Yeah, I'm not friends with their ex. And lesbians seem to hang out with everyone they've dated and slept with.
Yeah.
Should lesbian circles be trying to normalize it? Or do you think it's like...
I think it's hard because you'd have to go in any relationship, whether it be a straight or queer relationship, that's between you and your partner. Would you feel okay being friends with your ex? Probably not.
I think it can be done.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I also think it depends on how deep that connection went with that person, because you and I have a mutual friend that we were both briefly with for a time. And
I think that part's
and we're still
different.
friends with that person.
Yeah.
So I think it definitely depends on depth. And I think for some people it can genuinely work. But I think it definitely depends on the circumstances in which you broke up in the first place.
Yeah.
Was there pain? Was there malice? Were there ill intentions? I think all of those things play into it.
If the other person is like keeping someone on the hook or that kind of thing, either they're like, oh, I don't want to be together right now, but we'll be friends because
I'm keeping you as a second option for later.
Don't be a dick.
Yeah. Look, I don't think it's fair to say it's normal to still run in the same circles as your ex, especially if some of these really bad things happen to you. In my last relationship, which I've talked about briefly, I found out that my girlfriend was cheating on me with a guy because I saw a message from him on her phone. We've all been there.
Yeah.
I think. I don't know. Besides that being the
But
absolute...
you would have had some sort of suspicion.
Oh,
no?
yeah, totally,
totally. To look at a phone in the first place.
Well, it dinged and it was next to me.
Sure.
Besides that being the absolute lowest point that I've ever felt in my life and circling the drain for months, I feel like if there was a genuineness of her wanting a friendship there from her side, I wouldn't be opposed to that.
But
Mostly
I think that also comes from the fact that you guys were together
for 8 years.
For 8 years.
Yeah.
But I think that's like you and I are very open at communicating. And when you and I had met, we weren't in a relationship straight away. We waited 4 months before we were like, oh, we're actually dating.
Yeah.
But I was very understanding and knew a lot of the stuff that you had gone through with your ex.
Because I was open and honest
because you were
about it
open
all.
and honest about it all, and the communication side of things. But I think if it had been a situation where I wasn't so understanding, or she had waited so long and then it wasn't like this genuine friendship thing, and then I was like, there were times where I came to you and I was like, are you sure it's not something more than her just wanting friendship?
Yeah.
Kind of stuff.
And look, those are all the factors that play in. Like,
yeah.
And look, we were together for 8 years of my life. I still miss personality traits of hers.
Of course.
On a friendship level.
But that's because you and her grew up together in times of like formative years. So
yeah, so I still miss her on a friendship level, but I feel insanely secure in our relationship that I don't really think that it would be an issue. However, she doesn't hang out in the same circles as my friends. So that would not be an inner circle friendship. Whereas one of my exes still hangs out in my friendship circle.
Yeah, that's fun.
And I find that one a bit harder to swallow, even though I feel like that was over 10 years ago. And I think that's because you spend this time with someone and they learn all these intricate parts and details of you that even some of your closest friends don't know about you. And maybe you wouldn't want them to know. Like with this partner, this particular person, I went through skin cancer. I went through really harrowing things in my life, and they saw really, really raw parts of me that I haven't shown people outside of close relationships. And so sometimes the actions of a person can make you doubt if they're going to keep those vulnerabilities to themselves or if they're going to essentially air your dirty laundry. And when people are running in the same circles as your friends at times and you still see them, it makes it hard because you don't know if those vulnerabilities are kept safe.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense.
I feel like that's the biggest thing when you're running in the same friendship circles with your ex. I feel like there's just vulnerabilities on the table that may or may not be comfortable for either of you.
Yeah, that's a whole uncomfortable situation, even for me as a current partner coming into the situation. It's always uncomfortable for me to be around an ex of yours.
Yeah. And you know, sometimes I wish like in my mind I could just like wipe the slate clean. Like I really wish I could, because it would be easier for me. It would be easier for other people. But I think, like I've touched on briefly in other episodes, I come across as this hard person that doesn't care.
No, but you're gooey
but
and soft.
So much of me is so vulnerable so many times.
But people don't see that.
And you know that because you're my partner, but not everybody gets to see that. And so it's kind of like you don't want that exposure.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That was a very deep chat.
I have a fun question to end on.
Is it actually fun?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Why do you think lesbian relationships progress so quickly in comparison to other relationships on a grand scale?
I think it's just the connection.
Yeah.
The emotional connection side of things. If you're able to emotionally connect with someone straight away and be understanding of what people need or want because you're either of the same sex or you're able to think the same ways, I think that's what it is.
I found this awesome article.
Oh, okay.
In the article called Understanding Lesbian Time
Great.
by queersapphic.com,
What a great title.
they said, this time warp is fueled by a deep emotional intimacy that develops quickly.
I was right.
Without the barriers of toxic masculinity, lesbians often feel freer to embrace emotional vulnerability and intimacy from the very beginning. The comfort of being with someone who deeply understands your experiences, your identity, and your world can create a powerful bond a lot faster. And I think that is such a true answer because that's true to me.
Yeah, I think that is a true answer to even just reading that. I kind of half said that.
You were on the money.
Yeah, I kind of half said that, but I think because it's not just that surface level conversation, you're able to have those deep conversations straight away because women emotionally understand one another straight away.
Mm-hmm. The article goes on to say, at its core, Lesbian Time speaks to how women connect with each other in a world where emotional vulnerability is often viewed as a threat, especially in the context of masculinity, which we're trying to change. We're trying to change that. Women have long found deep connection and comfort in each other's company. So naturally, this transfers over into women loving women romantic relationships even more. The deep emotional bonds that women form can feel more immediate and intense, and this cultural intimacy naturally influences lesbian romance.
Wow.
While lesbian time can create a beautiful relationship, it's also important to be mindful of its intensity.
True.
The emotional connection can feel so profound, it can be hard to slow down, like not being able to stop at 3 cookies and eating the entire box because it's so delicious.
Everybody loves eating the entire box because it's so delicious.
Here's the kicker as to why it's so cutting when it ends. The rapid pace can sometimes blur boundaries and accelerate the relationship before both partners fully get to know each other.
Wow.
So in a space, we're so overwhelmed with the emotion of these connections because we experience this intense level of emotional connection and understanding that we forget that we actually don't know the other person as well as we should. And then obviously not everybody is a match.
Yeah.
But I thought that was super interesting.
That is really interesting. That's a great way to, I guess, kind of explain it all and why the lesbian time warp happens.
And I want to reach out to our gay friends.
Ooh, gay friends.
In our male relationships. Can you shed some light on what is it like from the male perspective in a gay relationship.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you guys progress a lot quicker than a straight relationship, or do you feel it's on the same timeline? Like, is there a gay timeline or is it just a lesbian timeline?
Yeah. I'm sure there's different answers and timelines to everyone under the rainbow umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
I feel heavy now.
Yeah. But I do feel like there is no definitive answer of what is harder, a straight relationship or a queer relationship.
I don't think you can put, pun intended, I don't think you can put it in a box.
No.
No. It just depends on the personal or emotional connection that you have to someone. And I think we've said in so many podcast episodes, yes, we identify as gay, but that doesn't mean you can't wake up tomorrow and find someone that you think is attractive, or you have this, not relationship, but you have this drawn to.
Everybody has
thing.
Sexual fluidity.
Yeah,
let's face
that's
it.
what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it. Thanks for joining us in peeling back the layers of our human connections.
Ooh.
I will also link the article from queersapphic.com because it is a great read if anybody wants to read that lesbian timeline.
This will also be a great topic for our lovely friends at Q News.
Yes. So if you are grabbing a Q News magazine, you may have seen a little column from our podcast on there as well. So thanks for dropping in.
Yeah.
And until next week,
You better remember to
stay gay, motherfuckers.
I'm talking about, you're talking about, we're talking about just gay stuff.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Just Gay Stuff. Make sure to follow us at Just Gay Stuff Podcast on all your socials, and write to us with your stories at justgaystuffpodcast@gmail.com.